Well, folks, welcome back to another episode of Broadcasting Seeds, where we plant the seeds of thought that might just grow into the kind of questions you never knew you had. I'm your host, Bennett Tanton, and today we're diving headfirst into a topic that's as old as humanity itself: the fear of hidden forces pulling the strings behind the scenes. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Bennett, are you really going to talk about a Luciferian cabal secretly ruling the world? And to that, I say, absolutely. But before you go reaching for your tinfoil hats, let's take a deep breath. This episode isn't about convincing you that the world is run by a bunch of cloaked figures chanting in dark rooms. Instead, we're going to explore the idea, break it down, and look at why so many people believe in these kinds of theories. We'll see where the roots of this belief come from, and maybe, just maybe, we'll find some nuggets of truth along the way. So, grab your coffee, settle into your favorite conspiracy corner, and let's get weird together. But don't worry, I promise to bring a little humor along for the ride, because what's life without a little laughter? Even when we're talking about shadowy, world-dominating cabals, right? All right. Coming up, we've got 5 sections that will take you on a journey from the historical origins of the Luciferian cabal concept all the way to the psychological reasons why these theories persist. We'll even toss in a bit of New World Order talk because, well, what kind of conspiracy chat would it be without it? So, without further ado, let's dive into the darkness and maybe find a little light along the way. Let's kick things off by setting the stage with some history. Now, when we talk about a Luciferian cabal, a secret group pulling the strings from the shadows, we're dealing with an idea that's woven itself into the fabric of human storytelling for centuries. But where did it all begin? To get to the roots of this concept, we have to go way back. Back to the days when people huddled around fires, telling tales of gods, demons, and the eternal battle between good and evil. In most of these stories, there was always a trickster, a rebel, or an outcast, a character who defied the divine order. And in the Christian tradition, that character is none other than Lucifer himself. Lucifer, the light bearer, the fallen angel who dared to challenge God, has always been a symbol of rebellion. But here's where it gets interesting. Over time, Lucifer morphed from being just a rebellious angel into something much more sinister in the eyes of many, a symbol of ultimate evil, and the idea of a Luciferian agenda was born. Fast forward to the Middle Ages, a time when fear of the unknown was practically a national pastime. The church was powerful, and anything that even hinted at rebellion or heresy was seen as a threat. Enter the idea of secret societies, groups of people who supposedly practiced dark arts, worshipped strange gods, or, worst of all, dabbled in Luciferian rites. Think of the Knights Templar, the Freemasons, or the infamous Bavarian Illuminati. They all became scapegoats for society's fears, accused of being part of a grand, sinister plan to overthrow the divine order and replace it with something, well, a lot less holy. But let's not forget that history is often written by the winners. These secret societies were likely more about brotherhood and shared knowledge than about world domination. However, Their secrecy made them the perfect targets for conspiracy theories. People fear what they don't understand, and the unknown is a breeding ground for wild speculation. Now, why does this matter today? Well, these ancient fears and suspicions didn't just vanish. They evolved, spread by word of mouth, later by the printing press, and today by the internet. The idea that there's a secret group out there pulling the strings has persisted for centuries, morphing from the Templars to the Illuminati, and now to what some call the Luciferian cabal. What's fascinating and a little unsettling is how these stories have endured and adapted, finding new life in each generation. Today, the idea of a Luciferian cabal isn't just the stuff of medieval superstition. It's woven into modern conspiracy theories that claim to explain everything from global politics to economic crises. And folks, if you've ever wondered why some people believe the world is run by a secret group of evil masterminds, well, now you know. It's a tale as old as time, just with a few new twists and turns. But don't worry, we're just getting started. So now that we've got a handle on the history, let's turn our attention to the here and now, specifically how esoteric beliefs and symbols are said to influence the institutions that run our world. You see, the idea of a Luciferian cabal isn't just some dusty old story from the Middle Ages. It's alive and well in modern conspiracy circles, where people believe that symbols of the occult and secret rituals are woven into the very fabric of global power structures. Let's start with the basics. Esoteric beliefs. The word esoteric itself means something intended for or understood by only a small number of people with specialized knowledge. Sounds secretive, right? That's because it is. And when you mix secrecy with power, well, you've got yourself the perfect recipe for a conspiracy theory. Take a look around and you'll see what I mean. Ever noticed how certain symbols keep popping up in strange places? The all-seeing eye, the pyramid, pentagrams. These aren't just random doodles. To those who believe in the Luciferian cabal, these symbols are proof that the cabal's influence is everywhere. They point to the US dollar bill, corporate logos, and even government buildings, claiming that these symbols are hidden in plain sight right under our noses. Now, let's talk about institutions. Governments, corporations, religious organizations. These are the pillars of society, right? But what if I told you that some folks believe these institutions are more than just pillars? They're puppet theaters, with strings being pulled by unseen hands. For example, the Freemasons, a fraternal organization that's been around for centuries, are often cited as being a front for this Luciferian cabal. The Masonic symbols, which are themselves rooted in esoteric traditions, are said to be proof of their hidden influence. Never mind that most Freemasons are just regular folks who enjoy a good handshake and community service. In the eyes of conspiracy theorists, they're part of something much darker. And then there's the Vatican, the seat of the Catholic Church. Some theories suggest that even the Pope isn't immune to the cabal's influence. They point to the presence of occult symbols in the Vatican's architecture, claiming that the church itself has been infiltrated by Luciferian forces. It's a bold claim, to be sure, and one that certainly adds a layer of drama to Sunday Mass. But let's not forget the role of corporations, the real movers and shakers in today's world. With their vast wealth and global reach, they're the perfect targets for conspiracy theories. From tech giants like Google and Apple to financial powerhouses like Goldman Sachs, these companies are often accused of being part of a grand Luciferian scheme to control the world. And the evidence? Well, it's often as simple as a logo that looks just a little too mystical for comfort. Now, here's where it gets interesting. While it's easy to dismiss these claims as pure paranoia, it's important to understand why they resonate with so many people. In a world where power is increasingly centralized and opaque, the idea that there's a hidden hand guiding our fate isn't all that far-fetched. We see symbols we don't fully understand. We notice the interconnectedness of global institutions. And suddenly, the idea of a secret cabal doesn't seem so outlandish. But remember, folks, just because something is mysterious doesn't mean it's malevolent. Sometimes a triangle is just a triangle, and a handshake is just a handshake. Still, it's fascinating to consider how these esoteric symbols and beliefs have embedded themselves in our culture, and how they continue to fuel the fire of conspiracy theories to this day. All right, so we've covered the historical origins and the modern-day institutions allegedly influenced by this Luciferian cabal. But what about the big stuff? The world-shaking events that leave us all reeling and wondering, how did this happen? I'm talking about economic crises and wars. Those monumental moments that seem to come out of nowhere and change the course of history. Could these events be orchestrated by a hidden hand? Now, let's be real. Wars and financial collapses have been a part of human history since the beginning. But the idea that these events are not just random occurrences or the result of political blunders, but instead carefully planned moves in a grand chess game by a cabal of elites is a powerful one. It gives a sense of order, even if that order is terrifying, to the chaos we see in the world. Take, for example, the 2008 financial crisis. A lot of people lost everything: jobs, homes, savings. It was a disaster that rippled across the globe, and for many, the explanation that it was all due to subprime mortgages and risky financial practices just didn't seem to cut it. Enter the conspiracy theory. What if this was all part of a plan? What if the crisis was engineered to consolidate power and wealth into the hands of a few, while the rest of us were left to pick up the pieces? Supporters of this theory point to the fact that some of the biggest beneficiaries of the crisis were, surprise, surprise, the very institutions that were supposedly at fault. Banks that were too big to fail got bailed out, while ordinary people were left holding the bag. It's not hard to see how someone could look at that and think, this wasn't an accident. And then there's war, arguably the most destructive force humanity has ever known. Wars have shaped nations, toppled empires, and redrawn the map of the world countless times. But are they really just the result of clashing interests, or is there something more sinister at play? World War I, for instance, is often seen as a conflict that erupted due to a complex web of alliances, nationalism, and militarism. But there are those who believe that the war was engineered by powerful elites who wanted to reshape the world order. The same goes for World War II, where the rise of Nazi Germany and the subsequent global conflict are viewed by some as part of a larger plan to create chaos and then impose a new world order. And it doesn't stop there. The Vietnam War, the Gulf War, the Iraq War, Each of these conflicts has its own set of conspiracy theories suggesting that they were orchestrated by the cabal to achieve specific goals, whether it's controlling oil, establishing military dominance, or simply creating a climate of fear and instability. But here's the thing: war and economic crises are complex, multifaceted events. They involve countless players, unpredictable variables, and often a fair amount of sheer dumb luck. To attribute them to a single all-powerful group is both an oversimplification and, in some ways, a comforting thought. Because if there's a grand plan behind it all, then at least there's some kind of logic, however twisted, to the madness. But before we start blaming every global disaster on a secret cabal, let's remember that humans have a remarkable ability to screw things up all on our own, without any help from shadowy overlords. Still, the idea that someone, somewhere, is pulling the strings is a hard one to shake, especially when the stakes are so high. So, is there a hidden hand orchestrating these events? Well, that's up for you to decide, but one thing's for sure: whether they're caused by accident or design, the impacts of these crises and wars are real, and they shape the world we live in today. Now that we've waded through the murky waters of economic crises and wars, let's turn our attention to a concept that often sits at the heart of these conspiracy theories: the New World Order. Ah, yes, the big one. The ultimate goal of this supposed Luciferian cabal, where all the plotting, symbol peddling, and war starting finally pay off. But what exactly is the New World Order? And is it fact or fiction? Let's start with what the term actually means, or, more accurately, what people think it means. The New World Order is said to be a global regime in which a single, authoritarian government controls every aspect of life. Borders, gone. National sovereignty, a thing of the past. Personal freedom, you'd better believe that's on the chopping block, too. It's a vision of the world where power is centralized in the hands of a few, and everyone else is just a cog in the machine. Now, where did this idea come from? The term itself has been around for a while, but it gained real traction in the late 20th century. People began to notice patterns: political leaders using phrases like New World Order in speeches, international organizations gaining more influence, and the rise of globalism. For some, this wasn't just the natural evolution of a world becoming more interconnected. It was a sign that something sinister was afoot. Proponents of the New World Order theory point to various pieces of evidence, and I use that term loosely. For example, the creation of the United Nations after World War II is often cited as a major step toward global governance. The idea here is that by bringing nations together under one roof, the groundwork was being laid for a single world government. And it's not just the UN. Other organizations like the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Health Organization are also seen as tools of the cabal, designed to erode national sovereignty bit by bit. Then there's the European Union. What started as an economic partnership has grown into a political union with its own parliament, currency, and a whole bunch of rules that member states have to follow. To some, the EU is a model for what the New World Order would look like: a collection of once sovereign nations, now bound together under a single authority. But let's not forget the technological aspect. With the rise of the internet social media, and surveillance technology, the idea of a global government watching our every move seems a lot less far-fetched than it did a few decades ago. Some theories suggest that these technologies are tools used by the cabal to monitor, control, and ultimately subjugate the global population. Big Brother isn't just watching, he's tracking your search history, reading your emails, and listening to your conversations. But here's the kicker. While the concept of the New World Order is terrifying, it's also incredibly vague. For every piece of supposed evidence, there are countless questions. Who exactly is behind this plan? How do they coordinate their efforts? And why, if they're so powerful, haven't they succeeded yet? These are questions that don't have clear answers, which is part of what makes the theory so compelling. It's like a puzzle that you can never quite solve. Now, don't get me wrong, there's no denying that global governance is a real thing. International organizations do exist, and they do have a significant impact on world affairs. But whether that impact is part of a grand Luciferian plan to establish a new world order, that's a whole different ball game. It's easy to see why the idea of a new world order resonates with so many people. In a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable, the thought that there's some kind of plan, any plan really, can be oddly comforting, even if it's a dark one. But as with any conspiracy theory, it's important to ask yourself, what's the evidence? And more importantly, does the evidence actually support the theory? Or is it just a series of coincidences stitched together by our need to make sense of the world? So, is the New World Order fact or fiction? That's for you to decide. But whether you believe in it or not, the concept has undoubtedly shaped the way many people view the world, and it's a powerful reminder of how fear and uncertainty can give rise to some of our most enduring myths. So far, we've explored the origins of the Luciferian cabal concept, its alleged influence on global institutions, the idea that it orchestrates crises and wars, and the shadowy specter of the New World Order. But there's one more piece of this puzzle that we need to talk about, and it might be the most important of all: fear and misinformation. You see, fear is a powerful thing. It's primal, it's instinctive, and it's one of the oldest tools of control. When we're afraid, our brains kick into survival mode, and we start looking for threats everywhere. It's in our nature to seek out patterns, to connect the dots, even when those connections might not actually be there. This is where conspiracy theories find fertile ground. Think about it. When the world feels out of control, when we're bombarded with headlines about wars, economic downturns, pandemics, and political turmoil, it's natural to feel afraid. And in that fear, we start to wonder, why is this happening? Who's behind it all? The idea that there's a secret group pulling the strings gives us a sense of understanding, even if that understanding is based on conjecture rather than fact. Now, let's throw misinformation into the mix. In today's digital age, information moves at lightning speed. Social media, 24-hour news cycles, and the internet at large have made it easier than ever to share ideas. But they've also made it easier to spread misinformation. And when that misinformation taps into our fears, it can take on a life of its own. Let's take a step back and think about how these conspiracy theories spread. It usually starts with a grain of truth, an event, a symbol, a speech that gets interpreted in a certain way. Someone, somewhere, sees a pattern and starts to ask questions. Maybe those questions are innocent at first, but as they dig deeper, they start to connect more dots, adding layers of meaning that may or may not actually exist. Before you know it, that initial observation has snowballed into a full-blown conspiracy theory, complete with villains, heroes, and a narrative that explains everything. But here's the thing. Once a conspiracy theory takes hold, it's incredibly hard to dislodge. Why? Because it's built on a foundation of fear and mistrust. People who believe in these theories often feel like they've uncovered a hidden truth, and that sense of discovery can be intoxicating. It's like they've been let in on a secret that they don't want you to know. And who doesn't love being in on a secret? But the reality is that most of these theories are just that, theories. They're built on shaky evidence, speculation, and a whole lot of what-ifs. And yet, because they tap into our fears, they persist. In fact, they often grow, adapting to new information and evolving to fit the times. Take the idea of the Luciferian cabal, for instance. It's a concept that's been around for centuries, but it's constantly being updated to reflect modern anxieties. Yesterday it was the Freemasons, today it's tech giants and global elites, and tomorrow? Who knows? But here's the kicker. Conspiracy theories, while often based on fear and misinformation, aren't entirely without merit. They can reveal real anxieties about power, control, and the state of the world. They can be a way for people to express their dissatisfaction with the status quo, to question authority, and to seek answers in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable. And in that sense, they serve an important function, even if the theories themselves aren't always grounded in reality. So, what's the takeaway here? Well, first, it's important to approach these theories with a healthy dose of skepticism. Ask questions, sure, but also look for evidence. Don't just connect the dots. Ask yourself if those dots are even part of the same picture. And most importantly, recognize the role that fear and misinformation play in shaping the narratives we believe. Because at the end of the day, the real conspiracy might not be that there's a Luciferian cabal pulling the strings, but that our own fears are being manipulated by others, by the media, or even by our own minds. Well, folks, we've traveled quite the road today, from the ancient roots of the Luciferian cabal concept to its modern-day implications, and even into the psychological underpinnings of why these ideas persist. It's been a wild ride, full of twists and turns, but I hope you found it as enlightening as I have. Whether you're a die-hard believer in these theories or just someone with a curious mind, one thing is clear. These ideas have a way of capturing our imagination. They speak to deep-seated fears and concerns. And in a world that often feels out of our control, they offer a way to make sense of it all, even if that sense is built on shaky ground. But remember, as we navigate these murky waters, it's important to keep our critical thinking hats on. Ask questions, seek evidence, and don't be afraid to challenge the narratives you encounter, whether they come from mainstream sources or the fringes of the internet. Because in the end, the truth is out there, but it might not be as simple or as sinister as it seems. Before we wrap up, I want to thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed today's episode, Please take a moment to like, share, and review Broadcasting Seeds on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps us keep the conversation going and brings these fascinating topics to an even wider audience. And hey, if you have thoughts, theories, or questions about today's episode, feel free to reach out. I'd love to hear what seeds this episode planted in your mind. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and as always, keep your mind open, because the truth is often stranger than fiction.
I got bad thoughts that make my mind scared, hold me hostage and they don't fight fair. Who gon' pray for me and wipe all my tears? Who gon' save me if you not right here? Move this darkness and make my sight clear. Take me your way cause I don't like here. Ghosts of my past, they fill in the night air. Wake me up, I'm trapped in my nightmares. Wake me up, I'm trapped in my nightmares. Drowning, I'm off the deep end. Apparitions of all my demons. All my thoughts are committing treason. All alone, who gon' hear me screaming? Manifestations of my fears. Regrets that stretched out for light years. Can almost touch the light, homie, it's right there. Body free but trapped in my nightmares. Wake me up, don't let me drown. All the lights are fading now. All my life is fading now. All my life is fading now. Wake me up, don't let me drown. All my life is fading now. All my life is fading now. Body free but trapped in my nightmares. Wake me up, I'm trapped in my nightmares. Trapped in my nightmares.